All right, so we are going to start our reactions. And yeah, I took a couple days off for, the new year and other things. And just didn't post any. I posted a lot during the month of December. And yeah, so we'll get back to them now. Today, we are going to watch a few, but we're going to start out with another slow year ahead for Star Citizen Progress. The classic, rage-inducing for the community Morphologis video, because he was supposed to be their savior, and he has, obviously come to reality of what Star Citizen is. A lot of slow progress, so here we go. I lowered it, it's very loud.
For many, 2022 wasn't the year they expected for Star Citizen's development. Despite blowing up funding records, surpassing a whopping 100 million in a single year for funding, a good few goals set in the beginning of 2022 by...
I think showing the bugs is a little bit disingenuous for, like, Star Citizen's progress, though, just to be fair.
By Star Citizen founder Chris Roberts in his letter from the chairman weren't met, and it really wasn't even close. And guess what? We just got another letter talking about 2023. So in a moment, much like last year's controversial video on the same topic, no, not that one, I'll quickly summarize what Chris said, and then I'll tell you what I think that means for this year, 2023. Hint, it's probably going to be another slow year, but there's definitely still much to be excited for, even taking into account CIG's track record of missing delivery dates. So if by the end you thought I did a good job breaking things down, and you think I deserve it, don't forget to hit that like,
He's as bad at racing as I am.
subscribe button, and slam the notification bell so you know the next time I post a video. So I'm going to try to quickly summarize the letter, but it's kind of long. So if you guys read it already, I've bookmarked the video so you can skip ahead to what it means for 2023. In other words, my thoughts on interpreting all that he said. He also reflects, though, quite a lot on 2022, so if you've not read the letter yet, but you want to get to the part where he talks about 2023, I've also bookmarked that. However, I do encourage you to stick around to listen to the whole thing, as there are some nuggets about 2022 in there which inform 2023, and so it's worth listening to. So, let's talk about his year in review. Chris began like last year's letter in
Wait, was that a bounty that just stood there the whole time?
On 2022, where he shared his thanks for the supportive and enthusiastic community, who he sees as fully supportive of Star Citizen's ultimate goal of a fully connected and simulated universe. He goes on to say that without the community-driven funding model, Star Citizen couldn't exist. He continues on exciting the much-anticipated persistent entity streaming tech, or PES, coming in with 3.18 as a prime example, as its development timeline would not be acceptable via other funding models. He explains that PES will allow for server meshing later on and will enable items to persist on a scale that is greater than anyone else has ever tried to deliver before in gaming. While he doesn't admit that it took longer than anticipated, he does mention that it didn't make it into live this year, like they had originally planned, suggesting at least an acknowledgement of the delay. Chris then emphasizes that PES is a complex...
That's one thing that kind of does bother me a little bit about Chris, is he does, but he doesn't. He, like, jokingly admits mistakes, but doesn't really ever be like, man, sorry, we need to do better. I want to do better. He's never really done that,
technology that will enable really important features like emergent gameplay, salvage, and soft death, just to name a few. He then talks about how the community contributes greatly to the development through not just giving feedback and testing, but also by contributing ideas that make the game better. Personally, I think this is one of the best parts of following and engaging with Star Citizen's development. He explained that good ideas from the community often get incorporated, like the new racing features in 3.18, which are thanks to CIG responding to the needs of Star Citizen's growing ship and ground vehicle racing community.
Again, I will hammer this home. What has changed more than, the racing community? I swear it's there's at least one developer from a different studio in chat right now, and I'm not trying to put them down, but Montreal comes in and this stuff happens. I think it's more of a Montreal thing than it's great feedback from the community and all this stuff. It was those guys doing something really cool.
Is really, really cool. In the next section, Chris then reflects on his May letter from the chairman in 2022, that's last year's, saying that the trend of an ever-increasing player count continued on into the next year. He then somewhat, in my opinion, kind of awkwardly goes on to indirectly try to address the controversy towards the end of last year surrounding there only having been a single 3.x patch for the entirety of 2022, that was 3.17, by talking about how 3.17.2 should have been renamed since it had a lot more features than a typical dot patch. By directly addressing this, in my opinion, I think it kind of highlights the problem of last year having been kind of light on content, and it would have been a lot better maybe to just honestly talk about it and say, hey, it was a light year, but that's because we were focusing on Squadron 42 and PES. I think that would have been fine and felt a little bit more genuine.
And we had a lot of discussions about CIG lying, but just being, I think it's more that they're not genuine, right? And in that case, that felt so disingenuous. And it's just be honest and things will be okay. And if you just were yo, Star Citizen, we don't really care about it right now.
But I understand
what would happen. They wouldn't get the money.
Where he's coming from, he is the CEO of a company and he has to paint things in a positive light. Notably, he also omits talking about any reflections on what other things he said in that earlier letter about how he originally aimed for testing server meshing by the end of 2022, which definitely wasn't met. This is understandable again, yet I would have preferred an acknowledgement at least. It would have felt, again, a little bit more honest. He then talks about how new ships were introduced, like the Cutter, the Corsair, and the Vulture, and even mentions the concept ship, the Galaxy. He also then goes on to talk about the introduction of...
something that I pointed out is all of 2022 was in 2 paragraphs that I can fit on one 1080p screen. Those were the highlights of 2022. How is that a good thing?
The new Asia servers, which is actually a really big one for a lot of people in the community who have been in Asia and struggling with 100 to 200 plus pings for the entirety of Star Citizen development.
When does ping matter?
As I live in Taiwan. So then wrapping up this section, he then also mentions the various events for the year, like the Ninetales Lockdown and Jumptown, and how they kept many people engaged. Following that, he goes on to talk about the growth of Star Citizen in 2022, and there were some pretty good nuggets in here, mentioning that they saw an average of 240,000 monthly active users, which was 33% higher than 2021, and recorded up to over 800,000 new accounts. And of course, he also mentions that they reached over 100 million in a single year, which is the first time this has ever happened for Star Citizen. But he then goes on to mention that this money has, for the most part, been rolled into their newer, larger studios and to hiring more developers, which is a good thing. Hiring more people is definitely going to help them get the game out just a little bit quicker. One of the most interesting statistics, though, that he mentioned was that there was a 70% retention rate for players who tried Star Citizen during the free flies and went on to buy a package, which is a very positive statistic. And it demonstrates that the game is improving and retaining people, which is not at all.
See, that's not necessarily true, though. I don't think you could correlate with the game is improving and retaining people more as I think the game is showing its potential more. And there is clearly a model of, are they just buying Auroras? I don't know. Listen, the game is improving and it is able to retain players more, but I don't know if it's to the extent of people are making it out to be. And, yeah.
All what I expected. If you've been around for any free flies, then you'll know that's when the servers are typically at their worst, with the worst tick rates, the most lag, and the most, weirdness that you could possibly experience in
Yeah,
Star
and people are
Citizen.
still buying
so
the
again,
game.
it's surprising. But then he goes on to talk about the Bar Citizen World Tour, where CIG developers were sent to places around the world to engage with fans in place of the in-person CitizenCon we could have had were it not
They cut me out. I'm literally right here.
for the pandemic. And he notes that it was a really big success and wants to continue this on into 2023. I'm excited for this and I look forward to it myself. He then also talks about the new offices and CIG's return to work from home, which he thinks is returning them to a faster pace of development, which I think we can all agree is well needed. Finally, then we arrive to the part where Chris starts to talk about now and going into the future.
Yes.
Chris talks about 318 in the beginning part of this
When Chris becomes Chris.
last section, where he describes some of the highlight features coming in 318, like salvage, which is a new profession for non-combat players to explore. PS is also one of the big highlight features,
Non-combat.
which I explained earlier, which he then goes into more detail to talk about, like how it will remember the location of objects and players everywhere in the universe. He then thanks testers for once again helping to find the bugs in PES so that they can get it out to us sooner. Shifting over to talking about the future, he talks about this year in a very positive light, saying that he thinks it's going to possibly be the biggest year to date. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, Chris. To begin with though, when they come back from vacation, they'll have to stabilize 318's PES tech in order to get it into our hands and into the live servers in January. After live though, he emphasizes that they'll need to continue working on hardening PES, which includes not just bug fixing, but additionally adding some quality of life features. One such important feature will be the ability for us to choose which shard to join. Shards, if you don't know, are CIG's word for the persistent instances or servers that we're able to play in. Since we don't have server meshing yet, persistent objects like crashed ships or placed items are unique per server. Without there being a mesh environment, each shard is basically unique, and so if we're not able to join the same shard or the same server, then our experiences will be effectively the same as they were before.
Shards are Ultima Online's word. It started with Ultima Online, but it's used in all sorts of tech like this.
Where nothing seems to persist because we're not able to join that same server we were on before. Chris says though that this is just a short-term solution while server meshing is being worked on, as that system will automatically place players into their home shard, and that will have a lot more players in it than just 100, which is what we have right now. Moving on from 318, the next step for them will be to separate the replication layer part of PES or persistent tech from the servers. Right now it's running on the server memory and they need to get it off that memory. This will make Star Citizen a lot more crash resilient, as if a server crashes,
See, like, this is and he's going to go into it. As if a server crashes, you're not going to see it, and it's all going to be fine. I'll believe that shit when I see
in
it.
the system, the player will just stay connected as if the server never crashed. They'll be automatically connected to a new one without them even ever noticing. He explains that this tech will also make the universe a lot more fluid and less laggy, as it will, the replication layer will no longer be tied to the server tick rate, which has traditionally been pretty bad. After that, they're going to work on having multiple game servers connect to the same replication layer, allowing multiple servers to simulate the universe state, which is what they call server meshing. They will first start with a static form of server meshing, where each server is assigned to a specific zone. For example, a planet will have its own static server. Chris says though that once this is done, they want to quickly move on to dynamic server meshing version 1, where servers are dynamically assigned entity zones or planets and stuff like that based on gameplay and simulation load. This is a lot more efficient, as they don't need to run servers where there are no players.
I mean,
dynamic server meshing version 2 though will follow version 1, which is a step even further. This is going to subdivide the servers into smaller servers, what they call simulation islands, which I believe is referring to things like large capital ships being their own server, as they're going to have a lot of people on them. At this point, Chris said,
and this is kind of where I get a little curious, and again, something I really don't understand, but the thing that I worry about is it sounds expensive. Like, if people want to run like huge cap ship battles all the time, stuff like that, like servers are going to spin up all these things. How much is that going to cost? Is this eventually going to be cheaper, or is it more expensive now? And because the server costs now, when you look at the financial report, shit's really high. And who's going to pay for those servers? So it's more a lot more scalable. See, I think it's more expensive now, right? I still worry that it's going to be cheaper, but cheaper than what it is now is still really expensive. And it's just like the funding model will continue, right? When will this funding model stop and shift to something more less game breaking? I don't think it ever will, and I've maintained that kind of feeling because I think server costs are always going to be, kind of up there for a game like this.
That they should be able to handle tens of thousands of players in the same large universe. This is setting quite a lofty goal, but I'm confident that eventually they're going to be able to pull this off. The only question, as always, is how long is it going to take? Well, thankfully, we don't have to wait until this version of dynamic server meshing to get a new star system and a lot more content. Chris reminds us that the first version of server meshing, static server meshing, will bring a new star system, Pyro, along with a lot of new gameplay.
Yeah, who cares?
So when will all this happen? Well, Chris once again gives us a date that, if history is any indication of, is probably very optimistic. He says that they are aiming for static server meshing with Pyro by the end of the year 2023 in Q4. He caveats this, of course, by saying that server meshing is a complicated technology that requires a lot of work by engineers with other related systems. Much of this depends on their progress as well with PES and the aforementioned hardening they want to do following 3.18. Chris, though, does say that there is more planned for 2023 than just server meshing and AI population improvements with the new Pyro system. The aim is to roll out new ship resource management, which is multi-crew gameplay, bounty hunting with full tracking and the ability to restrain NPCs and players, persistent hangars with freight elevators so you can call up your stored inventory or put things in storage, and more that he says he doesn't have time for in the letter. He goes on to say, and it's worth emphasizing here, that towards the end of the year, that we'll see the Squadron 42 related work that we saw at CitizenCon last year being translated over to Star Citizen.
And I kind of pointed this out in my video about this letter, was like, whoa, I would have expected to see this in our next patch, because this looked relatively polished. I know, like, obviously it wasn't perfect. The other stuff looked, while it was in white box, looked like it was working okay. It looked as if it was in a state that was deliverable to the alpha, right? No.
Which is, well, we'll talk about it in a bit. Stuff like the better player movement, improved interaction, first-person scanning, the new star map, and new MFDs for ships, as well as a better and deeper combat AI system. He then talks about how Star Citizen's new updated graphics engine called Gen 12 is now running in 318 PTU, and that the next step for the engineers is to work on multi-threaded performance improvements and to hook up the Vulkan graphics API, which will further unlock performance gains for players. Chris then closes with gratitude for the growth of CIG and the community. There are now over 861 CIG employees worldwide and more than 1.8 million backers. He feels that they've achieved a lot in 2022, but admits that they fell short with 318 not making it to live last year. However, he is happy to see that people are spending more time in Star Citizen than ever and looks forward to another great year. And before I continue with my thoughts, I just want to give a big thank you to Chris and the rest of the team over there if you guys are watching. I love everything that you've done, and even though sometimes I can be pretty critical and even negative at times,
except for the A2.
I still love the project and the work that you're doing. I wouldn't still be here if I didn't think it was amazing. And so, despite the bumps in the road that we've had and that was ahead, I want you guys to know that I support you, and I cannot wait to see what you guys do in 2023. So then, will 2023 be another slow year?
Yeah.
Well, with
100%.
all this new information to digest, I think that in this backer's opinion, it's going to be about the same as 2022. From what we've now learned from Chris's letter and judging by...
Hopefully they learned from 2022 and it's not about the same, but I kind of agree.
What I've seen throughout this past year, PS definitely took a lot longer than they anticipated, whether or not they're willing to admit it. And that's fine, but it does shift back their timeline for getting server meshing tested. Back in the 2022 chairman letter, if you guys remember, Chris talked about PS coming midway through 2022 with an anticipated longer cycle for bug testing. So server meshing is definitely being pushed back a lot. And Chris is anticipating not just 6 months lead time now, but at least 9 months, with him talking about being released in, 2023's Q4. And historically, Chris has been pretty optimistic about this kind of stuff. So that leads me to believe that we're likely not going to see Pyro in 2023 along with server meshing. If you've been following my channel though, and even following me on Twitch, you'll know that this is not really that surprising. Judging by the progress this year, I already saw the writing on the wall and shared those thoughts with you guys, especially after the CitizenCon we had. And if you think that's the end of the bad news, I've got some more for you. Maybe even more disappointing than this is that the work that we saw them working on in Squadron 42 at that last CitizenCon won't come out until server meshing is released. Their focus on Squadron 42 then really seems like it's not really helping the Star Citizen development schedule. It's more just like, it's something that they're working on for Squadron 42, and when they have time, they'll give it to us. I mean, that's kind of what I suspected, but...
See, like, that's not how I look at it at all. I think I look at it as they are bringing it to complete. They are no longer going to deliver things in this state, which are like the alpha state of things, and they are going to deliver them as complete to the PU when they finish them in Squadron 42. That can be taken as a good thing. That can be taken as a bad thing. I'm personally like somewhere in the middle, because hopefully they'll be pretty good, but at the same time, this isn't open development anymore. There is no feedback being given from the community on any of these features until they're done working on them. And I don't think they're going to go back and work on them very much once they deliver them to the PU, right? So if it doesn't come in perfect, then what? So I kind of see this as a good and a bad thing. We should be getting more features, more polished. And it comes down to like, okay, we wait a while, but once they finish, let's say these features, then over time, we should get more polished features to the PU on a more regular basis after like this incredibly long break of nothing. But is our feedback going to even matter anymore? I mean, did it ever in the first place?
It's
not
just really disappointing to find this out. It looked ready to go, or at least ready to be tested, but apparently
it looked ready to be tested.
And the same goes maybe doubly for the absolute...
And it's not that it's not ready to be tested. It's that they don't care to test it. They're going to do it their way, and that's it now.
Absolutely massive rework to the flight model, which he didn't even mention in this letter, which leads me to believe that we probably shouldn't even expect it in 2023.
Which is
but
insane.
Again, with what they talked...
Because they talked about it in... Why even talk about it?
About with like, all the ships that they need to...
And then didn't we not have like an end of the year video with them?
Change and update for the new flight model. Maybe it shouldn't be all that surprising. However, there is a little bit of silver lining if you look closely. Despite this disappointing confirmation of many of our suspicions, there are still things to look forward to, as Chris outlined in his letter, like the performance improvements to the game to make the game run better on people's systems. Those are much welcomed. Or a better bounty hunting system that will make the entire gameplay loop hopefully more playable and possibly actually fun. Persistent hangars with cargo elevators will hopefully further expand cargo gameplay and give us a more feeling of a home in the universe with a persistent hangar. And resource management along with the role assignments for our larger ships will make multi-crew gameplay finally possible in a bigger way than just having gunners. And while it wasn't mentioned, I hope that we can look forward to things like, combat logging fixes so that people can't just log off in the middle of combat, and, maybe saving player missions between server crashes so that you can pick up where you left off. Finally though, 3.18 has a good deal of features that many backers have yet to experience, as it's just in Wave 1. It's not even fully public yet. And so when PES is fully ironed out and 3.18 is in our hands and live, it will surely have months of gameplay for us to enjoy before we start anticipating whatever comes next, before Pyro at the end of the year, probably going into 2024. So then I recommend that you guys set your expectations appropriately for Star Citizen in 2023 to be similar to what we got in 2022, with server meshing being much like PES, being pushed back longer than anticipated into the next year. 2023 is indeed then set to be yet another slow year for development, as Squadron 42 is definitely still their main focus, and they have yet another big tech hurdle that they need to get done before we can get more good content. However, like 2022,
and
you
then
should
what
also
carried after
expect
that?
the unexpected, like the 100-player cap increase we got. Surely 2023 is going to hold some similar exciting surprises and updates, so I hope you'll stick around with me as I continue to talk about development and cover them here on my channel. But what do you guys think? Do you think my reading of the tea leaves here will be accurate? Or do you think I don't know what I'm talking about? I'm sure there are some of you who believe that.
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, none of us know what we're talking about.
Let me know what your thoughts are down below. I'm happy and encouraged by what he's talked about, and I really want to have a discussion with you guys. So thank you so much for an amazing year. I hope you guys had a great holiday season. Happy New Year. Your support means the world to me, so I hope to see you guys in the next one.
I mean, I just think it comes down to this. The last statement he just made is, I find very weird. He said something like, I feel positive based on his statements. I felt the exact opposite. I went, well, this year's going to suck again. So I don't really feel like there's no way that Morph's going to be making positive videos, too many of them in the year 2023. It's going to be a lot of critical stuff, most likely, because what else is there to do? Are we really going to be able to highlight anything cool that's coming out of Star Citizen from a content perspective in 2023? I certainly hope so, but we don't know yet. We don't know what the cards are for 3.19. We don't know what the cards are for whatever the patch is going to be called after that. Now that we know that 3 or 4.0 is not planned until at least December 2023. So, yeah, I just look at this as I was ready to quit my job and go content creation full time. And then this letter came out and I was like, hold up, I'm good. I will continue working. There's a 0% chance that I will take that risk, because it seems like a really dangerous risk to take after reading this letter. And yeah, it just 2 years in a row of 3.17, 3.18, those kind of things are that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough. And again, for me, what was delivered to 3.18, I think, is a really good stepping stone into the future that they need to build, which is like this technical feats that they need to achieve in order to make the game Star Citizen that they all kind of said that they were going to make. But for me, it's like delivering more content like racing to the game is really where I hope 2023 is these kind of not in their free time, because that's sort of how racing was made, but a focus on taking what is there and trying to make it more enjoyable. So the wait for these long-awaited technical hurdles are a little bit less painful. And that's what I hope 2023 is. But like Morph said, there were some features that came out in 3.17.2 that were like a surprise and were a positive surprise. So hopefully there's more of that as well. So I think it's going to be a relatively boring year, but I'm hoping, because I don't expect to get the content that I'm looking for out of Star Citizen. What I want out of Star Citizen is a playable video game, and I don't expect that in 2023, and I didn't expect that even if they finish server meshing. For me, all that stuff comes after they finally, if ever, complete that tech. So that's where I'm at. But thank you, Morph, for another informative video as always. And yeah, here's to another great year.